You're listening to the Urban Farm Podcast, your partner in the grow your own food revolution. Whether you've just been introduced to urban farming or you're a lifelong advocate, we're sure you'll leave feeling more informed, equipped, and empowered to dig deeper into the soil of your local food economy. With you every step of the way, here's your host, Greg Peterson.
Today we have Scott Murray on the Urban Farm Podcast to talk about his experience with avocado farming and urban agriculture. Scott has 42 years of organic agriculture production experience in the United States and Mexico. He has a multitude of experience with conservation, food production, and environmental leadership, including serving as an elected California conservation official for the last 22 years. Scott also specializes in farmland preservation projects utilizing smart growth principles. Welcome to the show today, Scott.
Welcome. I'm really excited to be on your show, Greg.
Yeah, thank you. So I shared a bit about you. Can you fill in the blanks for us and share more about the path you took to get where you're at now?
Well, the path I've taken started with Mom and the backyard garden we had in Marin County where I grew up. And the stories about our family surviving, my mom and her parents surviving through the Depression because they had a 2-acre city lot in Salt Lake City. So I've always been inspired to eat better by growing my own food. And I started out on the path of my growing while I was going to University of California, Santa Cruz. And I made about half of the money that I paid to go to school by growing in 3 lots that I leased around town.
Wow, how cool is that?
Well, it was very cool because I had places that I could go in different climate zones of Santa Cruz. And I sold to restaurants primarily, so I also had incredible trades for dining.
So you always had a good credit for food out there, huh?
It was stupendous when you're a college student. You don't necessarily have lots of cash, but if you can take a young lady out to dinner and sign the check, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, no kidding, no kidding.
So I also have been inspired to get started in actually being a farmer by a research project that I was assigned as a student at University of California. And I wrote about the future of agriculture in America, and it scared the living daylights out of me.
Wow. And so just for context, when was that?
That would be 1972.
Oh, all right.
And I was, during my undergraduate and graduate time there at UC Santa Cruz, I was looking for a direction of my career. And one part that I was always inspired by was growing food, because the food that I could buy in the supermarket then was really dreadful.
Wow, even back in 1972.
Well, back in 1972 is when the average produce department in a supermarket had about 120 items throughout the year. And now the average is over 600 items throughout the year. And I remember wanting a salad one Friday night, going at about 11 o'clock to this 24-hour supermarket. And the cucumbers were limp. The lettuce was, just ugly beyond description. The tomatoes were rock hard and green. And I was standing there kind of going, this sucks. I got to do something about it.
Yeah.
So I started as an urban farmer on a very intimate level, an 1/8 of an acre, 1/4 of an acre, and 1/2 an acre. And I started to develop my technique at growing organically, and I was selling to chefs. And in those days, and for many years after that, we sold our products as gourmet, because chefs had a bad impression about organic.
Oh, yes. Interesting.
And so we would say our items are gourmet, specialty, items. And if they were really concerned, they'd say, but how do you get this incredible flavor? How come your stuff holds up better than other people's things?
Right.
And then I'd tell them that we used organic growing techniques.
Perfect.
Then what I aspired to was a career. When you're going to college, it's like, where am I going with this?
Yeah, exactly.
And I was making already half of my income from farming, And I decided that was where my passion lay, and I started to steadily increase. I did my first full acre of double dug beds.
Oh, nice.
And one of the books that's been very influential to me in my career is John Jevons, How You Can Grow More Food in Less Space Than You Ever Thought Possible.
Yeah, that's a great book.
And so I double dug with my good friend Richard, who's still my friend to this day, thank goodness, an acre of beds. And that was an epic job because you're lifting soil with your back.
Right.
And after that, I promised myself that I'd never double dig beds like that again.
It's a lot of work, that's for sure.
And so I developed methods of using, for example, a rototiller to till a whole area and then shoveling up the walkways to loft the soil and create the depth.
Right.
And that's been the basis of my agriculture to this day, is building soil organically, creating the best possible growing conditions for the plants, and providing all of the major micro and trace elements through organic ingredients, so that the genetic potential of the things I was growing could be fully expressed.
Wow.
The full flavor, the full aroma, especially the full complement of vitamins and minerals.
Exactly. Wow. Do you apply this at a small scale, or are we talking hundreds of acres here?
Both. Right now, for example, I'm doing a project for the city of San Diego, developing a school garden at a highly impacted elementary school where 100% of the kids are on free or reduced lunch.
Oh, wow.
And the principal wants not only an outdoor science classroom, but a community garden that will teach the parents how to grow food for themselves in what little spaces they have where they live.
Nice.
Now that is an opportunity also to build soil in place.
Yep.
And to use the technique I was just talking about of lofting the soil into beds rather than making wooden box beds. And it just so works out that this area has several fire hydrants in it. So we met with the fire marshal this week and found out exactly how we could comply, creating this garden, but not interrupting firefighters if there was ever a fire at the school.
Oh, interesting. All the things that we have to consider. Now, are they taking that food, growing it, and then feeding it to the kids at the school?
They will use the food to feed to the students. This particular garden will not produce enough volume, so what they're going to do is make it lessons about cooking. So they'll do cooking lessons, and the students in those classes will get to taste the food, and they'll rotate that around the school.
Nice. So that's a big project. Do you have any small projects? Something like...
Well, that's actually a pretty small project.
Oh, is it?
It's a space that's only 75 by 100 feet.
Wow.
And it'll end up being about 20 raised beds. And this particular one is complex because we have to fit within existing systems.
Right.
And it's a partnership between the city of San Diego and the San Diego School District, which is unprecedented.
Wow.
And we're going to do a soil building technique called sheet composting. There's a lawn on this site on heavy clay soil.
Right. And
we're going to cover the soil across the whole site with about 2 inches of very high nutrition dairy-based organic compost.
Oh, very good.
And then about 6 inches of city-produced green waste compost.
Oh, nice.
Which is very good for organic matter, but has very little in terms of embedded nutrients.
Nutrients, right. Exactly.
All of that will be carefully spread out and wet down very thoroughly so the water penetrates down, at least a foot.
Right.
Then we cover the whole thing with 6 mil black plastic and hold that down to both solarize the former lawn and Bermuda grass and to create a soil building cycle, bringing the worms up and mixing the soil. That will take about 2 months. Then we will open it up and actually rototill the clay-based soil into the organic matter several times to create the new soil, and then loft that up into beds, shaping them with stakes and strings, and so the walkways will be shoveled up. And that's a small project.
Wow.
I just completed a project for the International Rescue Committee,
IRC, yep.
about 20 blocks away, where they're creating a teaching garden on an asphalt lot. We covered the lot with 6 inches of city mulch.
Wow.
And then in this place, we built 32 boxes that are 4 feet by 10 feet, laid out in a pattern with drip irrigation plumbed into each box. And we're putting organic soil into the boxes. So this teaching garden for at-risk immigrant youth will be certified organic.
Wow, and you put that right on top of the asphalt.
We put that right on top of the asphalt.
Wow.
The mulch underneath creates a separating mat, which deals with the runoff water and creates actually extra space for roots to go through the soil into. And it's literally in a very urban neighborhood. We've already had 2 pop-ups stolen from the site, and our tool shed and all of our tools.
Oh, wow.
And I then explained to them how it's really important to mark all your tools, and the more ridiculously you mark them, the better.
Right.
I use bright fluorescent green and orange spray paint to create bands on all the tools so I can spot them a block away.
Right. Wow.
And those are the 2 small projects right now.
Oh, very good. So these are the kinds of projects that anybody in a city could go get involved in, could create.
If you can build an amazing garden on top of an asphalt parking lot, or in the case of the school, you can build soil where there was very weak soil originally, you can create a garden just about anywhere.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. And so we mentioned avocados in the intro. So let's jump in and talk avocados. And we're not talking hundreds and hundreds of acres of avocados here, are we?
Well, I live overlooking Fallbrook, California, in Southern California, close to the coast, which is the home of the largest concentration of avocado production in the United States.
Wow.
Now, unfortunately, due to the increasing water cost and scarcity, we've lost 25% of our old avocado trees. And we've been growing them in an old-fashioned way where we let the trees 28 to 30 feet apart square, and they'd get 40 feet tall and then be stumped back down. And they could do that about 3 times in their lifetime.
Right.
But now these trees that I'm working with on 10 acres are 44 to 47 years old. That's getting to the end of their economic lifetime.
Wow.
So what we've done is we've stumped those trees, and instead of letting them get very tall, we're going to keep them very compact, only 10 feet tall,
right,
and 10 feet wide. And for the old trees, that'll require pruning each year. And then in line with the old trees, we're planting new, very high-performance avocado trees that are on modern rootstocks and are designed for what are called high-density planting.
Very good. High density, yes, exactly. Great.
And the high-density folks are putting as close as 4 feet apart their trees. We're going with 10 feet. But the average production right now on our old-style avocado groves is 6,700 pounds an acre.
Okay.
And with the 10 by 10 spacing, in the second year, one of the test plots of an acre already is harvesting 20,000 pounds a year.
Wow.
And those trees, because they're so close, might not have the same 50-year economic lifetime. You might swap them out, for example, at about 30 years. But they'll be so much more productive because they use the same amount of water as the large tree method, but produce a lot more yield, and they're more controllable because you prune them to be very compact and small.
Got it.
You don't have to climb up 20-foot ladders and use a 16-foot pole to pick the fruit.
Right. I was going to say, and they're easier to pick that way. That's the big thing about urban orcharding is you want to keep the trees smaller so they're easier to pick.
And labor is a concern these days, even if it's just yourself.
Right.
But the most exciting part about my work with avocados.
Hold on, I want a drum roll here. Let's do a drum roll. Because I actually know Scott. Scott's a friend of mine, so I've actually been to this project. Go, Scott.
So what we're looking at is the second most, or the other, probably more influential book in my agricultural career was Bill Mollison's first book on permaculture, which I bought back in 1977.
Wow.
And the concept of permaculture, basically learning from how natural systems work and trying to model them. And natural systems do not have monocultures. They have dense polycultures. So now we're taking these avocado trees that we've stumped back and we're changing their type shape. And in the rows in between,
here it is, guys. Listen up.
We call them alleys. We're planting coffee trees.
Isn't that fantastic?
And this is based on 12 years worth of research done here in California by a farmer and the University of California Co-op Extension. And they recognized, doing a project with lychee and longan, that they were visiting Hawaii to look for cuttings to propagate, that the avocado trees had coffee plantations all around them. And they thought, if the avocados survive in California, well, wonder if coffee will. So they've been testing, and what we're planting is a very rigorous scientific planting of 11 different varieties done across a 10-acre site. We're planting 5 acres right now, and that 5 acres goes from a high ridge down a long slope to a valley bottom, and then includes another sub-ridge. And so there are 5 test blocks where at the very top, at the 1/3 point, the 2/3 point, the valley bottom, and the sub-ridge, we're planting test blocks that have all 11 varieties.
Wow.
And then we're also planting larger blocks of between 100 and 200 plants of specific varieties that are unified in a big section. So when we go back to pick, we can keep the varieties sorted separately. And we have wonderful varieties like geisha, which is a 100-year-old variety out of Yemen, but that has always been one of the most sought after coffee varieties.
Wow.
And Pacamara and Mundo Novo and Caturra and Caturra Amarillo. So normally coffee cherries are red,
right?
But they can also be yellow.
Wow.
So we're also designing this planting so that we can harvest the coffee and separate it from the cherry, the skin and the pulp, from the seeds in a commercial kitchen.
Oh,
because
interesting.
The skin and pulp are very tasty.
Oh.
And also contain quite a bit of caffeine. So I found one day recently, going through the test planting up in Santa Barbara County,
right,
that I ate 35 of these fresh
were you
red
buzzing?
Coffee cherries. Well, at 35, I said, wait, I better stop. And I realized later at 3 a.m. when I was still awake that I had probably drank 4 cups of coffee worth of caffeine in those cherries.
Right.
So what we're doing is we're doing value added.
Yeah, that's
so we're going to preserve the skin and pulp, and it's going to be marketed to very exclusive smoothie bars.
Oh.
Where they make smoothies with different natural ingredients, where there's antioxidants and various things. So not only does the coffee cherry have a lot of caffeine, but it also is extremely high in antioxidants,
right,
and other good compounds. So it could be used in a smoothie. It could be used in making of products like brownies or something. And it probably could even be used in sushi. I'll have to work on that.
Interesting. Yeah, you said that a moment ago, and I didn't know whether you meant to say that or whether that was a oops.
No, it was an oops. I meant to say smoothie instead of sushi.
Right. But still, I mean, magic can happen in that moment just like that.
Well, and it does, because one of the things being a grower for 42 years is we have to grow things as a small grower. We have to grow things where we're not competing with the really big farms.
Right.
Because we still don't have the economy of scale working for us. So I've always done specialty items like fresh basil and other cut herbs, or specialty tomatoes, yellow tomatoes, pear-shaped tomatoes, purple tomatoes, red tomatoes with yellow interiors.
Yeah. Something
that set these fruits apart from, just the mainstream green that was gas ripened to red.
Right. Well, that is a significant way as an urban farmer to actually go out and make a living in an urban area. You pick a chef and you go to them and you say, hey, what kind of specialty crops would you like me to grow?
Well, you have to know how to grow.
Right.
Once you could take any packet of seeds and figure out how to get a crop out of it, you've achieved the point where you can now go to a chef and ask them, what things do you really want that you have a hard time finding fresh and perfect?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like good arugula is a good example, or good basil, fresh herbs, unusual items that they can use in their kitchens. So one of the other large projects that I'm working on right now, it's still in the planning and design phase, is to build an organic farm adjacent to a golf course.
Oh, interesting.
That will supply specialty food items to the country club restaurant on the golf course.
Wow.
This particular group actually has 4 other sites, 3 of which have these top-end restaurants. And at a certain point, to stand above the crowd, a restaurant can't use just the big things, the things that come out of the back of a truck from the really big suppliers.
Exactly.
They need an edge. So these folks are in a great climatic zone for heat, and we can take advantage of that to grow incredible melons and tomatoes. They have the commercial kitchens, so if we have a lot of tomatoes in the summer, they can make sauce that they can use in the winter.
Oh, yes, exactly.
It's like opening a bottle of sunshine on a cold night.
Nice. All right. Well, that is a lot of projects you're working on, and that is really cool. I'm excited to see how they turn out.
Oh, you'll get to. And there's more that we didn't cover today, but that's fine.
So moving forward, I'm really curious about this avocado and coffee project you're working on, or polyculture. So you're going to send some pictures our way for that, right? That we can include on the show notes page?
Yes.
Perfect. And as we go along, maybe in 6 months or a year, as you're actually harvesting coffee, maybe we can get you back here and you can tell us all about it.
I look forward to that. One part that we didn't discuss about that is we're planting 2,300 coffee trees.
Wow.
And the interplanting spaces is for 500 new fruit trees. So we're going to do about 300 of the high-performance avocados.
Right.
We're going to do 100 mangoes. And we're going to do 100 other tropical fruits in selection. And we're working to determine, the viability in that 100 of future crops. We've already tested mangoes at this site and found them to be very productive.
Well, if you're growing avocados in this space, you're going to be able to grow mangoes. That's for sure.
Well, there are different approaches to growing mangoes. Down in tropical Mexico, they turn into an enormous tree where there's like 24 per acre, and they're just huge and live for 50 years. We're going to use a method that was developed in Israel that is an espalier pruning, a very heavily pruned and shaped trees that keep this format of 10 feet wide and 10 feet tall, and that become extraordinarily productive.
Right.
And the most exciting thing, and a key piece of advice to your listeners,
yes, please,
is that we want people to look for high performance genetics. Yes. Whenever they're selecting seeds, they want to either get the best heirlooms they can find from a quality source if they choose to use hybrid seeds, there's organic hybrids as well as conventional. Those can give them an edge for challenging crops. But they want to pay good money for their seeds. Don't try to grow cheap stuff. Right. Because you'll put a tremendous amount of energy against basically one of your lowest costs. Mm-hmm. And it's difficult to overcome. And with trees, it's especially important. Yes. Because many times some stores will sell you an apricot tree that they brought into that region without even thinking about its compatibility. And it might not even fruit in the climate that you're buying it for. Yeah. But we have extraordinarily high performance nurserymen. One of my all-time favorites is Floyd Zager, who's developed many of the modern nectarines, peaches, apricots, and the interspecies hybrids like plumcot and pluot. Yes, yes. Amazing stuff. So you might pay $5 or $10 more for a tree, but you'll get a tree that is suited to your environment and is one of the higher performance trees that you get your hands on. So the same applies for me. For example, I'm going to test like 2 to 3 trees each of about 20 different mango varieties. Right. But I'm also working with a breeder who for the last 20 years has been working to breed mango trees that would withstand more cool weather. Yep. And would perform right here on the California coast. Yes. Right next to avocados. Yep. And I'm very excited to get access to his high performance genetics as he's able now to start propagating those trees. So 2 things about that. First of all, what's the name of that mango? Well, he actually has 9 varieties he's named. Because I just picked up, I'm here in Phoenix, Arizona, and I just picked up one that will go down to, from him through the Arizona Rare Fruit Growers Association, that'll go down to 24 degrees. Right. Those are the ones. Yeah. And that's good. You know, we may have a location where a conventional tropical variety will thrive, but when we're pushing the edge, we want to support these local breeders that are that are improving upon the material that we can use. So never scrimp on seeds and never scrimp on fertility. Because if you're going to eat what you grow, you want that to have the maximum complement of vitamins and minerals. Right. And when you think about it, putting a vitamin pill in your body that is extraction from various resources is one way to supplement. But nature really meant us to get our vitamins in a complete matrix from the food we eat. From the food we eat. And that's a conversation in itself. I do want to go back. You keep talking about genetics here also. And I want to just call out, you did say hybrid and heirloom. You didn't say genetically modified. So I want to just make sure that what we're talking about here is the genetics is through breeding, where they actually cross-pollinate and that kind of work rather than this whole notion of genetically modified, correct? Let's just help people to understand how that works. Okay. So an heirloom variety is something that is self-fertile. It will breed if it's cared for, and you take out the weak examples. It will breed true for generations and hundreds of years. Yep. A few of the tomatoes I like were first noted in the mid 1850s and 1860s. Now, a hybrid is like you and me, Greg. We have 2 separate parents that are distinct. And what they've made, especially in your case, is far superior than what each contributed. Thank you very much, sir. and so what we want to look for is certain things are a little more challenging to grow. So when a breeder hybridizes, he'll pick a parent that has a lot of built-in disease resistance and maybe one that has good production and good fruit shape. Let's say for a cucumber. And if you're just growing a couple of cucumbers at home, it's not so important. But if you're growing them for economic gain, it pays to buy a better quality seed. Now, the concept of genetically modified is a whole different animal where we're literally taking genes that would never breed in nature. And we're taking genetics from one organism and putting it into another organism.
I'm going to say one species and putting it into a completely different species, like going from a fish to a tomato.
That happens.
Yep.
And it happens that within a family like Solanaceae, they might use the genetics for eggplant roots to give tomatoes even greater root strength. Or now, for example, we have a lot of problems with watermelon diseases. And there's another thing happening called grafting.
Oh, yes.
Like fruit trees are grafted,
Yep.
The Red Delicious is one apple tree in Washington State that one branch spontaneously changed to this wonderful apple. So all the other Red Delicious apples are propagated from that one branch. So what we're also doing in vegetable growing, specifically in China, they're doing over 1 million acres of watermelon on pumpkin rootstock.
Interesting. And the reason they would do that is because,
well, the pumpkin rootstock can resist the soil diseases that will severely limit the productivity of the watermelon.
Perfect.
And actually can be more productive. Think about one of those really giant big pumpkins. If you use that rootstock, it's a power-packed rootstock. So we have heirloom, typically old-fashioned that breed true.
Yep.
Hybrid, that's two separate parents that are bred for quality and productivity. We have grafted, which is almost all fruit trees and now coming into vegetables and other things.
Yep.
And then out on the very edge is this concept of genetically modified. And that is actually a very positive scientific technology, but I think that the genie has been let out of the bottle for the plant world in a very frightening way.
Yeah.
And what I mean is that in human nutrition right now, we are making a lot of diabetics because of diet. And all insulin for insulin-dependent diabetics used to come from cadavers, humans that shared their resource into the future. And we now have far more diabetics than we could ever support with cadavers. And a brilliant scientist that I know in La Jolla modified a strain of yeast to make human insulin. So now diabetics worldwide are being supported by this insulin that's genetically modified. But it's passed under the drug laws, and it's so rigorous.
Right.
Whereas under food, the government set up rules that trust the companies producing the genetically modified organisms to tell us that they're safe.
Got it. And that's a whole bag of worms in itself.
And I'd rather have the worms, personally.
I'm with you there, too. I am with you there, too. So we need to get this wrapped up, and I got a couple of questions left for you.
Good.
First of all, I wanted to check in with you. Any projects you're currently working on that you would like to share about?
Well, I'm excited about a new project right now for a restaurateur up in Los Angeles. She has 2 vegan restaurants and has lived in a development pretty close to her restaurants, but she's just buying 9 acres outside Los Angeles in an agricultural area that'll only be a 40-minute commute to her restaurant, which is only like 25 minutes more. But on that 9 acres, she has a really good well, big plus.
Oh, yeah.
And already she has about 600 avocado trees.
Wow.
And she uses $2,500 worth of organic avocados in her restaurants every single week.
I was going to say that was a monthly figure, right? And you said no.
No, it's a weekly figure.
Wow.
She uses $10,000 a month worth of organic avocados. She pays more for her avocados than she pays to lease her 2 restaurants.
Oh my gosh. So you're helping her put together an organic avocado orchard.
And we'll go from a monoculture. There are also some citrus to one side, but it's primarily avocados. And we'll transform it from a monoculture to an organic polycultural system that will supply probably 60 different items to her restaurants.
Wow. That's taking it right home there. That is so cool. So one last thing. What one final piece of advice do you have for our listeners? I mean, I know you've covered the gamut of so much great stuff today. Do you have one piece of advice around all this?
Well, I like to tell my students, I teach at a college program out here, that everybody can become a farmer in 4 to 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
And all they need is enough room in their kitchen to set down a piece of business paper, 8 by 11.
Yep.
They can have 4 jars where they grow sprouts.
Yep.
And they start them in sequence so that like twice a week they have, half a pint of fresh sprouts.
Right.
And it takes probably about 3 minutes a day because you'll rinse them twice.
Uh-huh.
And then another 4 or 5 minutes to start a jar because you've got to measure out a quarter cup of, for example, one of my favorites is garbanzo beans.
Oh, yes.
So
absolutely.
I'll sprout those garbanzo beans in a quart jar, a quarter cup of beans, overnight soak, and then 2 rinses a day. And in 4 days, they're sprouted, have a little 1/4-inch root, and you can make raw hummus just by compressing them.
Oh, my gosh.
Let them go a couple more days, the root gets out to about 1 inch, and I just love them in salads.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So everybody, no matter how much space and limited resources they have, can grow sprouts, and they can be a farmer in a week. And then if they have a couple room for a few potted plants, they can get some culinary herbs and add some fresh herbs to their cooking that they grow right in their kitchen windowsill if that's all the space they have.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the show today and sharing your experience. It's been fascinating, that is for sure. If our listeners want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to do that?
Well, I'd say right now my email, which is Scott A. Murray, Murray, at sbcglobal.net. And I make my living these days as a part-time farmer and a part-time consultant to organic agriculture. So I help people to develop projects, to assess what they can do with their land, and to implement them and help them train staff and do all the parts that make them successful at being a farmer.
Thank you so much, Scott. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show today. And that's all for today. Thanks for joining us on the Urban Farm Podcast. Interested in learning more and taking control of your food future? Text Urban Farm to 33444 to sign up for our weekly urban farming newsletter. Jam-packed with urban farming tips, stories from people just like you learning to urban farm, and free classes, the Urban Farm Lifestyle Newsletter will equip you to join the urban farming revolution. Text Urban Farm to 33444.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Urban Farm Podcast. Remember to listen 3 days a week for tips, advice, and resources to help you on your journey with urban farming. You can find us on the web at urbanfarm.org or send us an email to podcast@urbanfarm.org. In the words of Vincent van Gogh, great things are done by a series of small things brought together. Be encouraged that with each lesson learned and skill developed, you are one step closer in the direction of your dreams.